Sophia Carter had always believed that determination could bend steel. From her earliest days in the Army, she had pushed herself harder than anyone around her, outlasting, outshooting, and outperforming peers who underestimated her because of her frame, her gender, or simply because she did not fit their definition of a special operations soldier. She wasn't chasing glory. She was chasing the chance to serve at the very highest level, the Navy SEALs. But 3 times she had walked into the application process, and 3 times she had walked out with the same rejection. Each letter read, like a cold dismissal carved in stone: female candidates do not meet the physical requirements for SEAL operations. To Sophia, the words weren't just ink on a page. They were chains. Her file told a different story. Every weapon system she touched, she mastered. She carried expert ratings across the board, from assault rifles to heavy sniper platforms. Her fitness scores were flawless. She had endured 3 deployments, 2 in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, and each time she had returned with commendations for composure under fire. Yet all of that had been reduced to a line in a bureaucratic statement: physiological limitations. The sting wasn't in the doubt of her own abilities. Sophia knew what she could do. The pain came from realizing the wall wasn't built by her failures, but by an institution that refused to open its gates. She had trained alongside men who would whisper that she was tougher than half the candidates already wearing the trident. She had been told by commanding officers like Colonel Emma Hayes, "You're remarkable, Carter, but this program wasn't designed for you. We're not discriminating. We're realistic." Realistic. That word cut deeper than any bullet could. Sophia carried the weight of those rejections into every day at Fort Bragg, where she had been reassigned after her last attempt. For 8 long months, she trained others: marksmanship drills with Rangers, tactical exercises with new recruits. She taught men how to do what she had already proven in the field, while knowing that doors remained locked for her. Every sunrise brought the same routine, the same slow burn of frustration. And yet, there was something different about her silence. It wasn't surrender. It was fuel. Sophia knew the military had a way of changing course in the blink of an eye. Wars shifted, missions failed, and policies rewritten under the weight of circumstance. She held on to that thought like a lifeline. If the right moment came, she would be ready. She had to be. What she could never have predicted was how violently that moment would arrive. The attack came on a morning that began like any other. She was out on Range 47, supervising live-fire practice with a squad of Army Rangers. The sun broke over the horizon, and the world seemed routine. Soldiers joked about chow hall food, compared scores on paper targets, adjusted scopes. Sophia moved among them with calm authority, correcting grip here, adjusting breathing there. Then came the sound, a ripple of automatic gunfire, sharp and merciless, echoing from the administrative complex. It was followed by the shrill alarm that cut across the entire installation, an alarm every soldier knew by heart. This wasn't a drill. Her instincts snapped into place before her mind could catch up. She ordered her trainees to secure their weapons, to fall back and hold position. Her own rifle was slung over her shoulder before the second round of gunfire rang out. Her heart hammered, not from fear but from recognition. This was her moment. Reports crackled over radios, urgent and chaotic. Armed hostiles had infiltrated the base, disguised as contractors. They were heavily armed, moving with precision. Within minutes, Fort Bragg was no longer a training ground. It had become a battlefield. As Sophia scanned the horizon, the base transformed before her eyes. Smoke curled above the rooftops. Soldiers scrambled for cover. The air was thick with shouting, sirens, and the rhythm of gunfire. She felt the weight of the rejection letters in her chest, the memory of every door that had closed to her. And now, as chaos reigned, she understood. This was the test no one had allowed her to take. She whispered to herself, as if steadying a lifelong promise, "Be ready." The first 20 minutes of the attack would later be studied in intelligence reports and military classrooms. But for those living it, time blurred into fragments of sound and motion. Sophia Carter stood at the rifle range, ears ringing with the clash of gunfire echoing across Fort Bragg. The air carried the acrid tang of smoke drifting from the direction of the main complex. Her radio erupted with frantic transmissions. Injuries reported. Unknown number of hostiles. Security compromised. She moved quickly, ushering her trainees toward cover. They were rangers in training, skilled but green compared to what this situation demanded. They needed safety. She needed to fight. The insurgents had chosen their moment with cruel precision. Later investigations would show they had studied base protocols for months, when security was relaxed, when drills were scheduled, when the greatest number of personnel would be concentrated. Dressed as contractors, they had slipped inside carrying weapons hidden in toolboxes and cases, blending with the flow of the morning. When they struck, they knew exactly where to go. Within minutes, chaos had a grip on the installation. Over 300 soldiers were present that day, including NATO officers observing joint exercises. To attackers, it was an irresistible opportunity. Eliminate America's most elite troops while undermining international confidence. And it was working. From her position on the range, Sophia could see smoke rising near the administration buildings. Small arms fire cracked like whips across the facility. She crouched low, eyes darting across the horizon, listening to every report breaking over the comms. Multiple casualties reported. At least 12 confirmed dead. Enemy positions inside logistics and barracks. Medical evacuations halted, sniper fire covering the LZ. The weight of those words pressed on her chest. This wasn't a raid, this was extermination. Then came the call. Foster, report to the range tower immediately. Every marksman we've got is needed now. The voice was sharp, urgent, leaving no room for hesitation. She sprinted across the gravel, boots pounding with purpose. Every fiber of her body screamed that this was the moment she had lived for, the moment all those rejections had failed to imagine. The range tower loomed ahead, an elevated structure overlooking training grounds. Normally, it was a classroom of sorts, a place for instructors to spot students and call adjustments. Today, it would become a fortress. At the top, she found Sergeant Major Robert Thompson and Colonel Michael Davis, their faces hard with urgency. Tactical displays were spread across the table, glowing with red markers that represented hostile positions. The dots moved steadily through the facility, methodical and merciless. Carter, we're out of time, Thompson barked. Every sniper on this base is either deployed, injured, or pinned. You're all we've got. Sophia's eyes swept the display. 15 confirmed hostiles, armed with military-grade rifles, spread across a 2,000-meter radius. They weren't reckless. They were coordinated, cutting off escape routes, pushing toward the command bunker where visiting NATO officials had been meeting. If they succeeded, the cost would be catastrophic. What are the engagement parameters? She asked, voice steady. 15 targets. Distances between 600 and 1,300 meters. Wind marginal. Light fading fast. You've got 90 seconds per shot before they breach critical areas. 90 seconds. That was barely time to breathe. She felt the challenge settle on her shoulders, like a weight she had carried her entire career. The kind of challenge the SEAL board had told her she could never meet. What's the weapon? She asked. Thompson pulled open a steel case. Inside gleamed a Barrett M82A1, the .50 caliber sniper rifle capable of tearing through armor at ranges others wouldn't even attempt. Alongside it sat match-grade ammunition and an advanced scope. Sophia knelt, running her fingers across the weapon like greeting an old friend. She had trained with one in Afghanistan, firing across valleys where wind turned bullets into guesswork. She knew its recoil, its rhythm, its demand for absolute precision. I need current weather data and exact positioning of every target, she said. Davis handed her a tablet streaming real-time intel. She scrolled through details methodically, distances, wind drift, angles. Target 1, rooftop of admin building, 847 meters, armed with a scoped rifle, covering routes to the bunker. Target 2, logistics window, over 1,100 meters, controlling the helicopter landing zone. Each marker was a puzzle, a calculation waiting to be solved. And friendlies? She asked. All secured or evacuated, Davis replied. It's clear. That was all she needed. She set up at the firing platform, adjusting the bipod, calibrating the scope. Her pulse slowed. trained by years of discipline. Outside, the world was chaos. In her mind, it narrowed to a tunnel. The rifle, the scope, the target. For a moment, she thought of those rejection letters, of the commanders who had told her she was bound by biology, that she would never carry the trident. She wasn't here to prove them wrong. She was here because soldiers were dying, and no one else could stop it. But part of her burned at the irony. The board had said women couldn't meet the standard, and now the standard had come to her. Her radio crackled. "Carter, 15 targets. You're cleared hot." She exhaled slowly, letting her body fall into that familiar rhythm of stillness. The first target came into view, steady, clear, unaware. Her finger tightened against the trigger. The war had found her, and she was ready to answer. The Barrett lay across the firing platform, like a beast waiting to be unleashed. Its black frame shimmered under the fading light, every angle built for precision and devastation. Sophia Carter ran her hands over the weapon, checking scope alignment, bipod placement, and the smooth slide of the bolt. To anyone else, it was an intimidating machine of steel and recoil. To her, it was an extension of her will. Colonel Michael Davis stood just behind her shoulder, his eyes fixed on the tactical display that updated with every passing second. 15 hostile markers, all moving with eerie synchronization, pressing steadily toward the command bunker. He spoke without ceremony. "You have one chance to stop them. If they get inside, dozens will die, including NATO officials. If they escape, they'll carry proof that our most secure base can be penetrated. You understand what's at stake?" Sophia nodded once. "Yes, sir." Sergeant Major Robert Thompson leaned forward, his voice quieter but no less firm. "Carter, no one expects perfection. Just do as much damage as you can." His words stung, though she knew they were meant to comfort. No one expects perfection. She had heard variations of that her entire career. What the SEAL board had meant was, no one expected her to succeed. But as she settled the heavy rifle into her shoulder, she felt the truth burning in her chest. She would not settle for damage. She would settle for completion. The first target appeared in her scope. A man crouched on the roof of the administrative building, weapon aimed toward the bunker access road. Distance, 847 meters. Wind, 5 knots, left to right. Angle, slight elevation. She adjusted the scope with small, precise clicks. Her breathing slowed. Inhale. Exhale halfway. Hold. The rifle thundered, the recoil slamming back into her shoulder like a sledgehammer. Through the scope, she watched the insurgent drop, weapon clattering as his body slumped across the rooftop. "Target 1 neutralized," she said calmly into the radio. "Copy that," Davis replied, though his voice carried disbelief. She was already shifting. "Target 2, logistics building, 2nd floor window. Range, 1,127 meters. A sniper's nest covering the helicopter zone. Soldiers below were pinned, waiting for medical evacuation." She aligned the crosshairs with the shadow of the figure moving just beyond the broken glass. Wind adjustment, 8 inches left. Timing required. She waited, patient as stone. The man leaned out, scanning for victims. The shot cracked like thunder. 1 heartbeat later, the insurgent collapsed backward out of view. Target 2 eliminated. Voices cheered faintly over the comms. Soldiers below, realizing the stranglehold on their position, had lifted. Sophia did not smile. There was no space for triumph. Only numbers left to solve. Target 3, moving across open ground, 1,230 meters, crosswind at 12 miles per hour. She tracked him, calculating lead, holding steady. The shot rang out, catching him mid-stride. Target 4, concealed behind a burned-out truck, 956 meters. She fired in the brief 3-second gap when his shoulder leaned past the frame. Another body fell. She became machine-like in her precision. Adjust, breathe, fire. Each shot was a calculation of physics, wind, and patience. Each kill was another line erased from the enemy's plan. By the 8th shot, her reputation among the command staff had transformed. Davis leaned toward Thompson, whispering, "She's doing the impossible." Thompson said nothing. He was too busy watching, eyes wide, trying to understand how one soldier could achieve what an entire sniper division would have struggled to match. But the insurgents were not ignorant. They realized they were being hunted. The next targets moved with caution, hiding in windows, crouching in basements. Target 9 crouched behind a narrow gap in the supply building's foundation, barely 12 inches of visibility. At 1,089 meters, the shot bordered on absurd. Sophia steadied, calculated the downward angle, and waited until the enemy leaned into the gap. 1 round. Perfect. 9 down, she muttered. The remaining 6 were clever, covering one another, leapfrogging through the facility. They understood they had a predator, but they couldn't see her. Sophia adjusted for shifting winds, corrected elevation for fading light, and began dismantling them one by one. Target 10 gone. 11, eliminated mid-sprint between cover. 12, a trained fighter, moving tactically at nearly 1,300 meters. He fell after a clean headshot that would be studied for years. By now, sweat dampened her uniform, though her heartbeat remained steady. She felt every ounce of recoil, every calculation weighing on her muscles. But she did not slow. 3 left, Davis said, awe creeping into his voice. The last insurgents abandoned their positions, fleeing toward the eastern perimeter. They were desperate now, sprinting across open ground. The first fell at 1,145 meters, a moving blur caught in her crosshairs. The second dropped at 1,287 meters after ducking in and out of concealment. The final man, target 15, pushed through fading light, 1,356 meters distant. Sophia steadied herself, ignoring the exhaustion. She calculated everything: the wind, the angle, the man's speed. She let her breath fall away and squeezed the trigger. The final shot echoed across the base. After 1.4 seconds, the insurgent collapsed mid-run, still clutching his weapon. Silence followed. Then cheers burst across the radios, across the compound, from every soldier who had been pinned, cornered, or nearly dead. All targets neutralized, Sophia reported, voice calm but steady with something deeper, vindication. Behind her, Davis whispered, almost reverently, 15 shots, 15 kills. Sophia lowered the rifle, her arms trembling not with weakness, but with the enormity of what had just occurred. She had been given an impossible task, and she had not missed once. When the last echo of gunfire faded, the silence felt heavier than the battle itself. Smoke still drifted across the training grounds, and the air was charged with the scent of gunpowder and burning debris. Soldiers emerged cautiously from cover, their eyes scanning the horizon as though waiting for another wave of attack. But the danger was gone. On the tower platform, Sophia Carter eased the Barrett's massive frame onto the deck, hands trembling slightly from the cumulative force of its recoil. She had fired 15 shots, each one a violent jolt that reverberated through her bones. Now, with the mission complete, her muscles ached and her breath felt raw in her chest. Threat eliminated, she confirmed into the radio. The response was immediate. Cheers and applause from scattered units across the base. Some voices cracked with relief, others with astonishment. Men who had been pinned down by sniper fire shouted her name, their disbelief mingled with gratitude. For them, her rifle had been the difference between survival and death. Colonel Michael Davis climbed onto the platform with Sergeant Major Robert Thompson in tow. Davis's face bore the look of a man who had witnessed something beyond protocol, beyond even military expectation. He paused behind her, staring at the battlefield where 15 red markers had gone dark on his screen. "Carter," he said finally, voice low, "what you just accomplished will be studied for decades." Sophia, still kneeling beside the weapon, kept her tone even. "Sir, I was doing my job. Our people were under fire. I had the training, the weapon, and the chance to stop it." Thompson stepped forward, holding a printout of the engagement log. 15 rounds fired. 15 confirmed kills. 0 collateral damage. "Carter, do you realize what this means? We expect our best snipers to miss sometimes. You didn't. Not once." She met his eyes, unflinching. There wasn't room for a miss. Word of her actions spread through Fort Bragg faster than wildfire. By the time dusk settled fully, entire companies were whispering about the woman who had saved them all with a rifle. Some spoke her name like a legend, others with stunned admiration. Soldiers who had never trained under her came seeking a glimpse, as though to see proof that one person could achieve what the textbooks labeled impossible. Hours later, Sophia found herself in a secure briefing room deep within the command bunker. The walls hummed with the sound of encrypted communication systems. Colonel Davis sat across from her, while Thompson stood guard near the door. On the screen in front of him flickered a live video feed from Washington. Senior officials at the Pentagon, their faces lit by the blue glow of the monitors. The man who spoke first was Admiral John Richardson, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command. His voice carried authority, but beneath it ran a current of disbelief. "Staff Sergeant Carter," he said, "we've reviewed your engagement data. I don't think I need to tell you that what you achieved today exceeds the capabilities of most SEAL-qualified snipers." Sophia sat straighter, keeping her composure. "Thank you, sir." The Admiral leaned closer to his camera. "I also understand that you've applied for SEAL training 3 times and been denied each time, citing physical standards." "Yes, sir. 3 times." The room held its breath. Even Davis, seasoned by decades in special operations, seemed to lean forward slightly. "Staff Sergeant," Richardson continued, "today you accomplished something that was not only extraordinary but unprecedented. You've demonstrated capability under combat stress that proves physical standards are not the only measure of a warrior's worth. As of this moment, I am personally inviting you to Naval Special Warfare Command for immediate evaluation for SEAL training." The word struck her like a second rifle shot. For years, the door had been slammed in her face with the same reasoning, the same cold dismissal. And now, in the aftermath of a single day, the door had been torn open. Sophia felt the weight of her journey. Every mile run in the dark, every bruise, every rejection letter burned into her memory. This invitation was not just personal redemption. It was proof that the barriers holding her back had never been about ability, only perception. "I accept, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion storming beneath the surface. When the call ended, Colonel Davis finally allowed himself a small smile. "Carter, you didn't just save lives today. You've changed the rules of the game." She lowered her gaze briefly, exhaling the tension of the past hours. "Sir, with respect, the rules needed changing." Outside the bunker, soldiers were still gathering in clusters, replaying stories of the day, where they had been when the shots rang out, how the tide had shifted with each confirmed kill. Some called her a hero. Others whispered she had achieved the impossible. Sophia avoided the crowds, choosing instead to walk alone across the scarred training grounds. The night air was cool, carrying the echoes of sirens that had finally gone silent. She knew what awaited her now would be harder than anything before. SEAL training wasn't a reward. It was the fiercest crucible the military could offer. But as she stared at the stars above the smoke-streaked sky, she felt no fear. The 15 shots had proven not only her skill but something deeper, that she belonged where others had said she could not. The war she had fought today was more than against insurgents. It had been against every assumption, every prejudice, every closed door. And tonight, she had won. 6 months after the attack on Fort Bragg, the waves of its impact were still rolling across the military. Reports had been written, data poured over, and analysts had broken down every detail of those 47 minutes when a single staff sergeant held off chaos with nothing but a rifle and unshakable focus. But to Sophia Carter, those months had been something different, the hardest of her life. The invitation from Admiral Richardson had not been symbolic. It had been a summons into the crucible she had fought so long to enter. SEAL training was not designed to be survived easily. It was meant to break the strongest men, to strip away weakness until only the absolute elite remained. The attrition rate was brutal, with candidates dropping daily from exhaustion, injury, or sheer mental collapse. Sophia endured it all. She ran the endless miles through surf and sand, carrying logs that felt heavier than her own body. She endured the bone-deep cold of the ocean at dawn, the deliberate deprivation of sleep, the relentless instructors whose voices were weapons designed to pierce confidence. Every day was an attempt to force her body to give out, to make her quit. But she did not quit. Not when her legs screamed in protest during forced marches. Not when her shoulders bled raw beneath the weight of equipment. Not when others whispered that she was only there because of politics, not merit. She carried within her a memory stronger than their doubts. The memory of that tower, the Barrett pressed against her shoulder, the 15 shots that had silenced an entire assault. That memory was not pride. It was proof. Week after week, she outlasted candidates larger, stronger, faster on paper. What they underestimated was her resolve. Sophia wasn't there to prove she was as good as the men beside her. She was there to prove that she was herself, capable beyond the limits others had imagined. When graduation day arrived, her uniform was soaked with sweat and dirt, but her face carried a quiet fire. She stood in line, muscles aching, as the instructors placed the coveted trident pin on her chest. The symbol that had once been denied her now gleamed in the morning sun. She had not just completed SEAL training. She had finished first in her class. News spread like wildfire, just as it had at Fort Bragg. Headlines announced it across the nation. First woman earned SEAL trident after legendary sniper engagement. To some, it was an inspiration. To others, controversy. But to Sophia, it was simply the next step in service. The military changed in the wake of her journey. Policies were rewritten. Selection processes were re-examined, shifting focus away from arbitrary measurements of strength toward real demonstrations of capability under stress. Training programs began to test adaptability, precision, and decision-making alongside endurance. Slowly, the walls built on outdated assumptions began to crack. Sophia never claimed credit for those shifts. She only trained harder, preparing for deployments with her new unit. But young soldiers, especially women, looked at her with a new kind of recognition. For them, she wasn't just a SEAL. She was a pathfinder, a living example that doors could be forced open if you refused to stop knocking. Her fellow operators came to respect her not because of her gender, but because of her results. In combat drills, she remained as precise and composed as she had been on the range tower. In strategy sessions, her insight carried weight earned from lived experience, not just theory. Slowly, the whispers about her being a symbol faded. She became simply another teammate, one trusted with their lives. But among the soldiers at Fort Bragg, the legend never dimmed. They remembered the way her rifle had cut down enemies one after another, how her calm voice over the radio had steadied the chaos. They told the story to new recruits, to visitors, to anyone who doubted what a single determined soldier could achieve. They called it the 15 shots that changed everything. Sophia herself rarely spoke of it. When pressed, she would shrug and say she had done what was required. But in private moments, she thought about the irony. The institution that had denied her had been saved by the very abilities it had dismissed. And while she carried no bitterness, she carried a lesson. Barriers were only as permanent as the people who challenged them. Years later, long after the Fort Bragg attack was studied in military academies, after new waves of recruits trained under revised standards, Sophia's name remained etched into the story of modern warfare, not as a hero in the traditional sense, but as proof that courage and skill recognized no boundaries. She had not set out to make history. She had only wanted to serve. But history had a way of finding those who refused to bow to limits. On quiet evenings, when missions allowed, she would clean her rifle with deliberate care, the way she had on the tower after her 15th shot. The sound of the bolt sliding home was the same, the weight of the weapon familiar, and she would think, not of headlines, not of the trident on her chest, but of the soldiers whose lives had continued because she had been there when no one else could. That, above all, was her legacy. 15 shots, 15 lives saved, one soldier who refused to quit, and a reminder, etched forever into military history, that the measure of a warrior was never in assumptions. It was in what they did when the moment arrived.